hello. Welcome to another program of Intentional Loving. It's a beautiful summer evening, and we're inviting you to join us as we have a very interesting discussion tonight. What are we going to be talking about?
We're talking about boundaries in the marriage relationship.
Yes.
And we're so glad that you can join us. And we want to encourage you and invite you at this time to share this video with someone who you would like to join this conversation. We want to give a quick shout out, though, to some persons who have joined us: Myrtle, Diane, Roxanne, Leslie, Nigel, Wilfred, my friend Fiona from way back, beautiful pastor's wife, one of our bishop's daughter from way back as well, Margaret, Simone Nurse, and all the bishop's wife. We're so glad to have all of these ministers' wives on with us tonight. We'd love for you to join this conversation. So for those of you who are joining us, do stay on. We want to hear from you. So what are we talking about? Should there be boundaries in marriage? Should there be boundaries in the marriage? What are your thoughts?
Yep.
And what kind of boundaries should there be in the marriage? So we would like to hear from you. Should there be boundaries in the marriage? And what kind of boundaries should there be in the marriage? So do put your thoughts there, and we are going to respond to those thoughts that you're going to share with us. Let us know what you think. Let us know if you think there should be boundaries, and let us know what kind of boundaries you think there should be in the relationship. But we want to share with you a few boundaries that we do believe are important, because I believe in everything in life, there needs to be boundaries.
Yes.
Because human life is of such, we are not static beings. We are dynamic beings. We are growing. Each of us are individuals, even though in the relationship, we believe that it is God's divine design that the two become one.
Yes.
We are still individuals.
Yes.
And there is need, I believe, for us to respect the individuality of the persons in the relationship. And because I believe that we are individuals in the relationship, first individuals and then individuals becoming one,
Right.
we believe that there are things that we must be very mindful of as it relates to the individuals, because there could be no us without me, first of all, recognizing and valuing the you and the I. It is the you and the I that becomes us.
Yes.
And I think sometimes what we do is that we tend to forget that even though we are one, that each individual in the relationship is a person and must be treated as such
yes.
in the relationship. So let's hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts about boundaries in the relationship, and what kind of boundaries? So let's talk about the first boundary that we believe should exist in the relationship. First of all, we think what you can call each other.
There should be a boundary.
There should be a
It
boundary.
relates to what you can call each other.
Yes, there should be a boundary as it relates to what you can call each other. And there should be a boundary as it relates to certain words that we may use in the relationship. For example, there's some, and it has to do with respect for each other in the relationship, how we respect each other.
Yes.
So, for example, we have known each other for a long time, and there's a certain degree of informality that sometimes occurs in the relationship. So we joke with each other. And sometimes in a relationship, even as we joke with each other and there is that absence of the formality,
Right.
there are lines that can be crossed. So for example, you may call your spouse, you may say, big head, or ugly, or fat girl, or stuff like that. Now that may be funny to you, but it may be offensive to your spouse.
Yes.
So names you call. So for example, people may get upset and say things like, you're stupid, or I would kill you, or I would slap you.
Yes.
Now there needs to be some boundaries
Yes.
about the things, because it may be
Words we say to each other. Right?
it may sound like a joke to you. It may be something funny for you, but it may be highly offensive to your spouse. So set boundaries about the names you will call each other, because name calling can be very destructive in the relationship. And you may say, well, why are you so tight up? So be very careful. One person says, no name calling, no profanity. I like that. We don't cuss each other.
No,
we don't call each other your fool,
whatever,
you're the
whatever.
thing with the big ears.
Even when we're angry.
Right.
Yep.
No name calling.
Those are some boundaries we don't cross.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Don't so set boundaries
Yeah.
about what you call each other.
Yeah.
Also, there are words. You wanna jump in there?
And also, if there are names that you do not like being called, then
Yes.
you should let your spouse know, right? Make it clear, like, please do not call me this. Like,
Yeah.
this does not help me at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So set boundaries.
Set boundaries.
Set boundaries
Let
with
your spouse
respect
know.
to
Yeah.
words and the things you will call each other.
Yeah.
All
'cause
right.
some words trigger emotions.
Yes.
They're connected to things that maybe you've gone through before,
Right.
or something that might have been said to you before. That does not bring back very pleasant memories. So let your spouse know what words they can use to refer to you, even when they're joking, even when you're being informal with each other.
Right. Well, more so words that triggers you a certain way. For example, my wife knows, and this has been since we are married, and it is just I don't think it is being facetious. It is just the way my brain works. One of the things that I never like people say to me is, you should do X, Y, Z, or you need to do so. Particularly as it relates to if there is a suggestion you are offering me, or you would like me to do something. The way my brain works, I would like you to make a request. Could you please do X, Y, Z? But if you are making a request of me, and in that request you are telling me you need to do this or you need to do that, promise you, my friend, doesn't matter how much I love you, it rubs me the wrong way. And so it is something that, because my wife and I are in a relationship, we talked about this, I think maybe in the first year of our marriage, how that's something that triggers me the wrong way. And so I think for the past maybe 24 years, she has not said that to me, and because she understands.
Well, I did sometimes, because sometimes you forget. So
Yeah.
I did, and then he reminded me.
Yeah, I don't like to be told.
Please, I don't like to be told.
Don't tell me you need to
should
do
and you
this or
need
you
to.
should do this or that.
Erase those words from your vocab when you're talking to me.
Yeah. So, but it's important in a relationship to let your spouse know, look, man, I don't like
Yeah.
these words. Don't use these words in the relationship with me. Don't call me these names. So there needs to be boundaries as it relates to the words you use and the names you call each other.
Right.
All right. The second thing, boundary, I think, is how you will fight. And we talked about this, and
Boundaries about how you will fight. Yep.
let me clarify that, okay? We do not subscribe to or encourage physical
fight.
fighting in the relationship.
No,
No. That's a no. No physical abuse, no physical fighting. But when we use the word fight, I think we are talking about conflicts.
Yes.
How you have disagreements, all right? How you have disagreements. So for example, you have disagreements in the relationship, and probably one person needs quiet time, or they need some space to settle that, and they're upset, so they need some space to be able to work that through in their mind. There needs to be some boundaries set as it relates to what's an appropriate way
Yep.
that we will deal with situations when we are upset, when we are angry.
Yes.
So if I say, listen, look, when I'm upset, I just need some space to process things, you must respect that and not force and compel me to respond because you need it to be dealt with. So there needs to be boundaries. If one person in the relationship says, look, this is the way I prefer to deal with this, then there needs to be a boundary set regarding you giving that person
That space,
that
and
space and time
yes.
to be able to process. So those are important boundaries.
I agree with you. I agree that, if someone is angry and they cannot respond, to a request from their spouse in that moment, based on the situation, then they should be given that time. However, you shouldn't just have, try to have your time without communicating also to your spouse.
Right.
You need to say to your spouse, look, I cannot deal with this right now. I cannot give you a response right now because I'm overwhelmed. And, I just need a little space and time. Just give me
Right.
some time and I will deal with it a little later or whatever. You need to also communicate in a situation like that, because your spouse can also think that you're just avoiding it
Right.
and you're not dealing with it. And that can anger them further
Yeah.
as well. So
An
it's all
important-
about
yeah.
communication through
And
it all.
I think
know?
you mentioned an important point too, which is the whole issue of how we treat with each other when we're upset.
Yeah.
Because you would recall a few days ago, we were talking, I think our last program, I was talking about stonewalling. And I was making the point that usually I am the one that stonewalls. And it is not that I'm angry, but it is that for me, when I'm upset usually, or not upset, but I usually process things in silence.
Stuff.
I usually process things better in silence. And when I have things to process deeply, my best time is to be left alone. It's better for me to be left alone to process those things. Sometimes it could be that I'm processing things in an environment where we may have had a disagreement, or if not a disagreement, some bit of disquiet. It's important how we treat each other. In that I can't stonewall and say, listen, man, just leave me alone.
Right.
That's not appropriate.
Right.
We need to communicate. Look, I'm processing some things, working through some things. Give me a couple hours.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on this. So it's not just being given the space to process, but it's also how you treat with the other person
Yes,
when
when
you're
you're
upset.
angry.
All right?
Yeah.
So we need to set some boundaries
Yes.
as it relates to how you treat with the other person when you are upset.
Yes.
One person says, Natalie says, set the stage so your spouse knows you are approaching the discussion with love. I love that.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
love that. Let me get some of the other comments. Follow us. Number 3, set boundaries about when you get alone time.
Yeah.
So you have to set boundaries about when you will get alone time, no matter how close you
Or
are in a
if at
relationship.
all.
Yes. No matter how close you are in a relationship,
Yeah.
both of you will eventually need some
Some alone
space.
time, yeah.
That's the way it is. I mean, I love my wife dearly, but I believe that there are times when she needs some time away, alone. I need some time also for myself.
Yeah.
And in every relationship, there has to be some boundaries set as it relates to alone time.
Yep.
And so if you don't set these boundaries in your relationship, what you will have is resentment developing because the other person is thinking that their time is being manipulated,
Yes.
their time is being controlled. And so in healthy relationships, both persons should be able to have control over the use of their time for personal or family relationship that is not controlled by the priorities of the other person, which is that they just have to adjust their lives based on the priority of the other person.
Yes.
Because you are going to need time for yourself. You're going to need time also for relationships, people who are your friends.
Right.
You're going to need time for people who are your family, and so for myself. So I believe it's important to set boundaries as it relates to that individual's time. Listen,
Okay. This is how we're gonna
this is how it is going to
handle
happen.
our alone
Yes,
time.
I'm
I
going to need
this
some alone
amount
time.
of time per
Yeah.
week, per month, whatever.
Yeah.
Girls' night out, boys' night out, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But listen, it's not appropriate to just take time out
Yes. Without agreeing.
without really
and
agreeing
communicating,
on look, I need some alone time. There has to be boundaries set. That when the agreement has been arrived at as it relates to our alone time, you cannot keep going back on that for the purpose of ensuring that your priorities are met only.
right,
No,
right.
you have to respect those boundaries.
Yeah.
That if the person is on a sabbatical or they're having alone time, whether it is, they're out with a friend and the agreement is that I'll be out for the next 5-6 hours or 2 hours or 30 minutes. You have to respect that.
Yeah.
You have to respect that alone time. You can't, 30 minutes, you pick up the phone and call, sweetheart, where are you? The baby is wet. Come on, man. Change the child, for example. Change the diaper. Well, these days we don't have diapers. Just change the pamper. All right? Respect that. Respect the time. Respect alone time. Set boundaries.
And set boundaries about the alone time.
About the alone
in terms
time.
of, how much each person in the relationship will get.
Yes.
How much alone
Yes.
time.
There has to be some equity
And
in the
it's not
sharing
that
of the
you're
alone time.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you're going to hold each other to that. There may be times when you may have to cut that short.
Yes.
For more important
Yes.
things or whatever. You're not going to hold each other to that, like to the T. That's not how relationships should be. You should
Right.
be able to, even in the boundaries about the different things, there should be a give and take based on situations as they arise.
Yes.
So,
Yes. So be flexible.
be flexible.
Be flexible.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Good. Number 4, how you behave on social media. Set boundaries.
Yes.
Set boundaries on how you behave on social media. Social media is a very public place.
Oh, yes.
I don't necessarily listen to secular music, but I think I was looking at the Grammy. I think it was the Grammy. And Lady Gaga said something that was very instructive. That's the only thing I remember her saying that night. Lady Gaga said, social media is the toilet. Social media is the toilet of the entertainment industry, whatever it is. Now, social media can be a very dangerous place. Yep. There's a lot of dumping of things there. It's a very public place. Yeah. And so you may be happy sharing a lot of posts and details of your personal life and your romantic life online, but you have to check in with your spouse. Yep. About partner, what their views are about social media and how much of their life they would like to have in social media. Yeah. I mean, you can't be just posting everything that you think you should post on social media when you have not had an agreement with your spouse as to how much of your life you want on social media. So there has to be boundaries set about how you behave on social media. What kind of if you're in a relationship, if you are constantly liking photographs with females, you are liking certain questionable posts, or as a female, you are constantly putting up pictures and postings of yourself that is inappropriate for public view, all of these things. So there has to be boundaries set about how you relate and conduct yourselves on the social media platform. So those are important boundaries as well.
It could be, just having a coworker or a family member on social media that your partner or spouse don't want involved in your private life.
Right.
It could be something as simple as that.
Yes.
You want to set boundaries about those.
Set boundaries. Yeah. Set boundaries. Powerful. All right. Let me see if we have any more posts that I can respond to. All right. Alone time is very important, vital in the relationship. Very true. So what you share with each other, set boundaries about what you share with each other. Now, I'm not talking here necessarily about, let me clarify the word share, because I'm not talking here about share in terms of information, and because I believe that there are things that there needs to be no secrecy.
Right, exactly.
But let me say this quickly. I have found, as a pastor, involved in ministry, dealing with people, dealing with different situations that may arise in the church context. Not everything sometimes in the church context could be pleasant. Not every meeting is a pleasant meeting. Not every interaction you have with people can be pleasant or for consumption. And I have found it necessary to, as I relate with my wife, I have found it necessary at times to filter. Now I want you to hear me clearly. Not lie to her, but filter the extent of the information I will give her regarding my work. Now, I'll tell you why that's necessary. Because there are some things about the systems and the structure of the church community that I function in that I may be able to deal with and process and work that through and come to conclusions as to what I will do and how I will respond. It's not necessary for my wife to me to download all of those things in sharing with her, because now she has to be brought into a sphere of the political life of my work that may not necessarily be in our best interest. So there are times when it's important for me to maybe filter and say, look, the details of this I will not give her, because so the sketches I will provide, the context I will provide, but some of the details I will not let her know, because it's not appropriate for her to consume all of what I process and deal with in the context of my work. But what's inappropriate is for me to be selective about the critical information and hide those. All right. But that's not what I'm talking about in terms of what we share. Because there needs to be an honesty and an openness about
and no hidden secrets.
So for example, there are things, for example, I'd go to a meeting and I'll come back and my wife would say, how was the meeting and so on, and I'll tell her, we dealt with some stuff, and there are certain parts of it I would say to her, but there's certain parts, I'm not supposed to tell you, because these things are important and confidential to whatever it is, whether it's a council meeting or whatever. But the details of things that may impact on our relationship, that may affect her life, it's important for her to know. That may affect the stability of her family or her future necessary. But that's not what we're talking about either.
Even though you've talked about it.
Even though I talked about it. But when as it relates to what you share, there are some boundaries that you need to establish about some things that you may share. So, for example, in some relationships, there are some people who are uncomfortable sharing certain personal things like their towels.
Yeah.
So you need to have an agreement. Look, we're not going to share towels. They're hygienic things, and I'm not going to prescribe. I'm simply saying, in some relationships, people are cool with sharing towels. They're cool with sharing toothbrushes. They're cool with sharing all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Bath gels, comb. Listen up. We are not going to pronounce on this program about what you should and should not share. You have to decide, and it's based on the relationship, and set the boundaries for yourself. These are mine, these are yours. If you want to share your toothbrushes, if you want to share your bath gels, that's for you to decide, baby. But there needs to be an agreement of the boundaries you will set about what you will share. All right? So, for example, you may have joint finances, and you may want to share with your spouse the ATM pin for your card, your online banking information. You decide on those things in terms of how you will share. There has to be boundaries, which here's why that's important. Because you don't want to know that your spouse is accessing things that belong to you that you consider to be personal and private. Okay? And they're accessing those things on you, and it's not there isn't an agreement about whether this is something you want to share or not.
Yes.
All right. So if you have a personal banking card and your personal banking information that you believe is private to you, and there is an agreement that your spouse would have their finances and you will have yours, you have to have an agreement that listen, my ATM pin is mine. Your ATM pin is yours, and have an agreement about those things.
Yes.
My password for my emails, my password for my social media, have those
Online
agreements, but there
banking,
needs to be
whatever,
boundaries. So, for example, if your spouse picks up your phone, and you have an understanding that listen, my phone is accessible to you. You can check my phone. You can access my phone. You can use my phone. You can use my laptop. Whatever it is, that's an understanding you have. But if you have never set those boundaries and you see your spouse going through your phone one day, of course you are going to be uncomfortable because you're going to feel violated because you have not set the boundaries as it relates to what you share.
Those boundaries.
So set those boundaries and talk about them. All right? Whether you're comfortable with that.
This is good.
Absolutely.
There are things sometimes we skim over and we don't pay attention to, but they're very important in terms of keeping the unity in the relationship.
So Nigel is asking, how about boundaries in association with the opposite sex? We're coming to that one, Nigel. Stay with us. Stay with us. Stay with us. We are coming to that in a minute. All right. Number 6, what you will and will not do for each other. Set boundaries about what you will and will not do for each other. So listen, in a relationship, regardless of how close you are, this is very open because, again, it depends on the nature of the relationship you have. So, for example, very early in our relationship, we had an understanding about what we will do for each other. So, for example, whenever I do the laundry, very early in our relationship, we don't take out, this is your clothes, I'm not going to wash this, I'm not going to touch this. No, we have an understanding that whatever it is that belongs to her, whatever it is that's hers, I will take care of it because this is my wife. We have an understanding of those things as it relates to what we will do for each other. When you're unwell, if you are sick, and there's some things in a relationship, people decide, no, I'm not doing this for you. These are things that you need to do for yourself. So, for example, there may be issues of, and I think in a relationship, we should not be legalistic about the apportioning of responsibilities as it relates to domestic chores and things to ensure, because there's a partnership.
Yes, it should.
So this whole idea of man's work, woman's work, in some relationships it exists, but our personal view on this is that really it's a partnership. And the idea is that you share the chores, You maybe want to even share the responsibilities, maybe for the management of the bills. Those are things that you may decide on in a relationship. But you have to set boundaries as it relates to what you will do for each other in the relationship. All right? Whether you are going to cover for a partner who is addicted or whether you are going to cover up, these are things, and we do not advocate.
Right.
Lying, for example, your spouse says, call in and let the boss know that I'm sick, and you're not sick. All right? Forcing your spouse to be dishonest to cover your failure or to cover you.
Yes.
Those are things that needs to be agreed upon in the relationship, which is, I have standards. These are my standards.
Right.
These are my values. I'm not going to lie for you. I'm not going to cover up for you. If the police comes rapping at our door and there is something in this house that does not belong to us, I will let the cops know.
Yeah.
So these are things that you have to agree on.
Yep.
Set boundaries so your spouse knows where you stand in terms of your personal values. I will not lie for you. I will not cover up for you. Don't expect me to do that for you. Don't expect me to be dishonest for you. Don't expect me to be carrying the weight when you are not making efforts to get a job, or you're not making efforts to do anything to help yourself. Stuff like that.
Yes.
Those are things that you need to agree on. All right? Clear boundaries will help to avoid unnecessary arguments as it relates to how much am I committing to doing for you or not doing for you.
Something as simple as, if I'm going to go to a movie that I hate,
Yes.
in
To strike
the
a
spirit
compromise.
of compromise, set clear boundaries in the boundaries in these areas. So, it helps to avoid arguments,
Yes.
So when you set boundaries about some of these things we're talking about tonight, it helps to avoid arguments.
Indeed. But what are your thoughts on that as it relates to someone deciding, look, I don't like this, I'm not comfortable with this, but just so that we can arrive at a place of compromise, I'm going to agree to meet you halfway on that. Isn't that something that helps with the health of the relationship?
Yes, it does. It does. And I'm all for that. I'm all for, meeting each other halfway, as we said, or having, making compromises, even as we were talking about earlier about the fact that we should set boundaries about alone time and, if you want to specify how much time. But there are situations that arise sometimes that requires you being, mindful of the fact that even though you've been allotted this time, or we have an agreement that this is your time,
right?
What is happening now requires you to make a compromise.
An adjustment.
And so an adjustment. So I'm all for that. I'm all for compromise. Even as we work through building the relationship and keeping the relationship strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Number 7. Set boundaries about how you will share in the sexual experience. Set boundaries about how you will share in the sexual experience. Here's why this is important. Because this is a major area of contention for a lot of relationships, as it relates to one party in the relationship may have certain sexual preferences or certain sexual fantasies, and they bring that into the bedroom, they bring that into the marriage relationship, and they expect the other person to respond. So they have all of these kinky things going on in their head that they want to do. Maybe they have been exposed to those things in previous relationships, or maybe in their...
Just fantasy?
Yeah, just fantasies.
Things they've seen on...
in
the movies.
And they bring that in and they want to try those things. There has to be an understanding and a boundary as it relates to what we do in terms of our sexual experience, right? That is not just things that are unhealthy and things that are abusive, and in some cases may even constitute a crime. That one has to be so mindful that a sexual experience is not just about one person's pleasure.
Right.
It's for the pleasure of both parties. Therefore, you have to set boundaries, all right, about what you will do. One partner should not be pressured into uncomfortable and unsafe sexual acts without their consent, because that's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. The both persons must agree that, okay, if we are going to experiment with these things, let's make sure that it is safe. Let's make sure that it is healthy.
Yes.
Let's make sure that it is not in violation of any value or standard that we embrace in our lives. But it must not be that one person does it to the discomfort of the other. So set boundaries about how you share in the sexual experience.
Yeah, that's why talking about your sex life and talking about it often also is very key.
Yeah,
It's very
important.
key. It's so key.
Yeah, that's a very important point you made about talking about it. I find, particularly in the Christian community, people don't talk a lot about it. They don't talk a lot about some of the whole issue of their sexual expectations.
Right.
They don't talk about sex generally. They go in at night, they turn the lights off, they pull the cover over their heads, and I have talked with people who still have inhibitions about seeing their spouse undressing before them, uncomfortable with seeing their spouse undress. They've never seen or undressing before their spouse. So they turn the lights off and they say, turn your back, and you're married.
And have kids.
Married with kids, and you still are uncomfortable undressing in front of your spouse. All right? So those are important things. Talk about your sexual expectations. All right? So we're going to wrap this up. The last one is, and Nigel was talking about that, set boundaries about time you will spend with someone of the opposite sex. That's not your spouse or or a family member. All right? Now, we do believe, my wife and I do, we've had this conversation for many, many years because I have friends that are females. My wife has friends that are males, people from her work environment when she worked many years ago in the bank. And we have had conversations about whether it is possible to have a good friend or a best friend that is of the opposite sex. And we've always talked about how those relationships, how you navigate your way through those relationships and the boundaries you set to ensure that those relationships do not become compromised and inappropriate. So you have to set boundaries about the time you spend, the time you invest with someone of the opposite sex that can impact on your own relationship. So there could be healthy relationships with someone of the opposite sex, but you have to be very mindful of the boundaries you set about the time you spend, whether it is the time you spend with them physically in person, the time you spend with them on maybe social media, texting or WhatsApping or chatting or whatever it is these young people do these days. But there are times when
not
those
just young people, but the society that we're in.
Yes.
Regardless of age, the things that we're involved in now in terms of how we communicate via.
Yes, indeed.
This
So you have to set
technological
boundaries.
age.
You have to set boundaries of, for example, a very important boundary. I remember because this is something I've heard so many times in counseling with people. Spouses would talk about, whether it's a husband or a wife, would talk about, and they complain bitterly. I'm in bed with my spouse, I'm in bed with my wife, or I'm in bed with my husband, and she is texting, or he is texting. It may be a family member that they're talking to, but it is just an inappropriate thing to be in bed with your spouse and be spending time, investing that time in a relationship outside of the marriage, whether it is a spouse, whether it is a family member or a friend. So there has to be an agreement of how much. So if you're on the phone, you may want to say,
I'm talking to whoever.
honey, sweetheart, I'm just responding to a mail here. I'm just responding to a text of a coworker. Communicate.
Yes.
But to sit there for half an hour or whatever with your spouse in the bed and you are texting someone outside of the house, that's a no-no. That's a no-no. So set those boundaries. Also, the whole issue of how when you are spending time with each other, how much time you allot for, and we talked about that earlier, how much time you allot for family, friends, because there has to be time where you spend with your friends and your family. I mean, it is just appropriate and proper that we be given time to invest in other relationships. But there has to be boundaries about how much we are investing in relationships with people of the opposite sex. That, because here's what I have learned. And we are going to wrap this up because we're beyond our time. I have found in a lot of situations where people have found themselves in marital infidelity, this is what I have found out. 99% of the time that people end up in problems in their marriage with a third party being involved, it is because they allowed someone into a particular space in their life that it should have never allowed them into, which means that some relationships you have to be intentional about how far you will let that person come in as it relates to what you share with them, the time you spend with them,
Yeah.
the time you invest, the way you invest, the context and the content of the kind of interactions you have with that individual that can really open up doors for emotional things to occur that may create a distraction in your own life that puts pressure on your own relationship.
I think one of the things to help with that also could be just assessing personally and maybe for your spouse, if they are not realizing how much time you're spending with someone or even your friends as against how much time you're spending with your spouse.
Absolutely.
And if you're spending more time with your friends, chatting with them, talking with them on the phone or however, than you are spending with your spouse, then that's a problem.
Yep.
You're crossing some boundaries that
crossing
you
some
shouldn't,
boundaries.
because then
And that's a no-no.
your relationship, your primary relationship is the most important, and that's the one that you should be giving more
Attention.
time and attention to. So even though you need time for friends and for family and for even a friend of the opposite sex, because I don't think that that is something that should be a no-no. I think it's fine, but like we said, set boundaries, as well as set your own boundaries for yourself, because we can cross the lines, like you said earlier. Most of the times, it's also people that we know that we end up that people end up having marital breakdowns and infidelity with. Most times it's people that they know. It's a friend of, that they know. It's someone close to the family.
Yep.
And so you have to set boundaries even for yourself, even as you have a friend of the opposite sex. You have to set boundaries for your own self.
Yes.
In terms of warning signs of things that you may be feeling, or words, subtle words that may be said, or whatever. Like we were always talking about being intentional. So be intentional about setting the boundaries as it relates to how much time you spend with a friend of the opposite sex. It should never be more time than what you spend with your spouse.
And we have spent quite a lot of time with you
Yes,
this evening,
and we
but we
must.
really enjoy our time with you, and we really appreciate you joining us. What I'm going to ask you to do tonight, okay, before you go off, I would like you to put in the comments, your comments, before you go off. Give us an indication of a topic you would like us to really address in our conversation. And we are going to work on addressing some of those topics because we want to really have you involved in the conversation. What are some of the areas that you would like us to maybe focus our attention on? Some of the things you would like us to discuss. And for example, if you would like to maybe at some point be brought on so that we can have you make a contribution on the program.
Yes.
Also indicate that so that we can maybe have you, there is a way in which we can be able to bring you on camera as well to make that happen. So again, I'm going to ask my wife to speak a blessing over your marriage, your relationship, wherever you are, even if you're a single person, but you are finding this conversation enlightening and uplifting. We want to pray that God will also minister to you as you avail yourself to be a channel and a conduit of blessing in the life of someone. Just speak a blessing and pray over it.
Father, again, we come before your throne.
Yes,
and
Father.
Thank you for this time we've spent together.
Yes.
Learning, sharing with each
Yes.
other so that we can be better individuals, better Christians, and most of all, better husbands and wives. We thank you, O God, that you will continue to work on us and perfect us and make us the people that you
Yes.
want us to be
Yes.
as we carry your name in the earth and we carry the light of God to the world in the earth. So strengthen us. Strengthen relationships tonight. Touch those that may be struggling and cause them to have success.
Yes.
Even as they intentionally, God, commit some of these things that they're hearing to practicing it daily in their own lives.
Yes, in
We
the
pray,
name
oh God,
of
that you would
Jesus.
bless their efforts
Oh
and cause
God,
them to
yes,
have
yes.
success. We come against the spirit of failure. We come against the spirit, oh God, of just giving up, chucking in, and, not being willing to continue. We thank you, God, that you will empower and equip
In the
your
name
people,
of
oh God,
Jesus.
to keep moving forward, to keep trying, to keep going on.
Yes, Lord.
Cause them not to lose hope, God. Cause them to know that you are the blessed hope. So bless and keep relationships
In
tonight.
Jesus' name we pray.
In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. God bless you.
God bless you. Thank you
so
for
much
joining us. Let's see your comment. Again, my friend, do share this video with someone. All you need to do before you get offline is just click share And it goes to your page
Yes.
that your friends and others can see this video as well. God bless you.
Bless
We'll see you again next
See you again
Tuesday
next week. God
for
bless.
another episode of Intentional Loving. God bless you, my friend.